the Heffernan song. Heffernan spells Heffernan.
Stand up.
From a defabricated solar-powered garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA, this is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, how to remind yourself of the importance of summer vacation with family after taking a soccer ball to the gonads. And now, the podcast host who has no worries for such things because his body parts retract like a kidnapped tortoise, Pete Dominic!
Oh, it feels so good to be seen by my friend Pete Coe. Thank you very much. I tell him one time that one of my testicles did not descend until I was 16 or 17. And the man just does not forget. Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Stand Up. It's the Tuesday show, and I've got a very special guest, the always brilliant Virginia Heffernan, for an over hour-long conversation where we covered so much. I find her so fascinating and interesting. We talked about her recent family reunion to Ireland, where there was over 100 Heffernans. I have no ability to relate, and I think a real fear if I were to get together with my extended family. And I just love to hear how that went. And then, of course, we got into so much more going on in the world, including a transformation of the social media landscape, our shared sense of optimism about life in the world, no matter what seems to happen. And then I highly recommend the last segment of our conversation, maybe the last 15 to 20 minutes, was about dieting and why it's so wrong and crazy and unhealthy for your mind, much less your body. She wrote a great piece on her Substack about it, and it gets really personal and wonderful, and I just absolutely love Virginia, and I hope that you can stay with a conversation like this that covers a lot of ground, a lot of subjects, but frankly, just personally, when I get to talk to someone who can go so deep on so many things, who's so thoughtful and brilliant, both intellectually, historically, literally, on literature, and emotionally, it's just, I'll ask her anything. And so it's that kind of conversation. I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to feel good at the end of it and have learned as much as hopefully I did in talking to Virginia Heffernan on today's show. But first, want to mention that I will not be hosting the Hangout on Thursday because I've got a speaking gig in West Virginia again, going back down to the National Conservation Training Center, this time for the Student Climate Congress, a whole bunch of high school kids who are environmentally conscious. Taking Julia with me before she goes off to camp on Sunday. I'll bring her up there. I will host a Hangout on Friday night instead. No Hangout Thursday, Hangout Friday. Be there Friday, 8 p.m., unless you hear otherwise. If you're not a paid subscriber, you're not invited. Come on, sign up now for as little as $5 a month, and you can join us. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic so I can keep doing this show each and every day, hosting these hangouts and so much more. What a wonderful community we have created here. People connecting, new people connecting all the time. So great to see all these listeners going out to see Maddie Carlson. Yesterday it was France Pants. Francis Walton was with Maddie down in Asheville, North Carolina, which was very cool. Always love to see it. So join us at the Hangout, connect on Discord anytime, and let's get to some of the news, a couple things I want to play for you, and then we'll jump into my conversation with the great Virginia Heffernan. First of all, huge news in that it looks like Sweden will get approval to become a member of NATO, as the leaders of Turkey have agreed to Sweden's membership. The leaders are gathering in Lithuania for a two-day summit that could become one of the most consequential gatherings for the NATO alliance in modern history, coming about a month into Ukraine's slow counteroffensive and weeks after a failed mutiny in Russia became a major threat to President Vladimir Putin's leadership, according to CNN. This will become an extraordinary foreign policy achievement by the Biden administration, and many people's eyes, not everybody, a lot of people don't like NATO, including on the left. Cornel West was critical of this, and many others have been as well. But it looks like Sweden will become 32nd member of NATO, essentially turning the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake, according to The Economist. I'll talk with experts about the significance of that issue and upcoming programs here Let's see, the weather is a top story because of obviously very high temperatures, heat wave persisting, flooding in the Northeast and New York and New England. A lot of people reaching out to me yesterday because they saw Rockland County on the news that was just north of where I live, where a road was washed out. We're okay here. Thank you, everybody, for reaching out. That meant a lot to me. Elon Musk challenged Mark Zuckerberg to a dick measuring contest, and I'm not joking or embellishing that at all. That's actually a thing that happened. And the Republican primary, in a related story, has become the testosterone primary of 2024, according to Politico. The presidential contest is careening into a frenetic Fit Boy summer side quest in which candidates are skirmishing over feats of strength, is the article. Got a lot of attention yesterday. I thought it was pretty funny and also very pathetic. But speaking of pathetic, I want to get to one of the big stories yesterday is about this former college football coach who somehow became a United States senator, who's dumb as a box of stones, and he is single-handedly blockading military promotions because of a policy in the Pentagon, in the military, that allows abortion access for service members. As a result of that, Senator Tommy Tuberville from Alabama single-handedly blocking hundreds of promotions for high-ranking generals and admirals since February, refusing to relent unless the Defense Department scraps a policy instituted after the Supreme Court struck down the constitutional right to abortion last year, offering time off and travel reimbursement to service members who need to go out of state for abortions. The senator's tactics are on the brink of disrupting the Pentagon's ability to fill its top ranks. More than half of the current Joint Chiefs are expected to step down from their posts during the next few months without Senate-approved successor in place, leaving the president's chief military advisory body in an unprecedented state of flux at a time of escalating tensions with China and Russia, is how the New York Times puts it. And here he is making a complete ass of himself for about 3 minutes on CNN. A lot of people talking about this from last night. And by the way, I don't think Caitlin Collins is doing herself any favors in this either, but here it is.
Speaking of the military, I do want to give you a chance to clarify some comments you made recently on white nationalists serving in the military. For those who are watching, if they haven't heard your remarks, this is what you said.
Do you believe they should allow white nationalists in the military?
Well, they call them that. I call them Americans.
Do you want to explain those comments, Senator?
Yeah, first of all, I'm totally against any type of racism, okay? I was a football coach for 40 years, and I dealt and had opportunity to be around more minorities than anybody up here on this hill.
Boom. And there it is. There's the tell. Unfortunately, Caitlin Collins decides not to jump in and never to go back to that. I had the opportunity to be around more minorities than anybody up here on this hill. First of all, who says that? Who would ever say such an unbelievably nakedly stupid thing, even if it were any way to say that that were true? I'm guessing that the people who he refers to, I no longer do, as minorities, would argue they had the opportunity to be around more people of color than anybody else up on this hill, because they are people of color. They are, as he refers to them, as minorities. Black and brown folks that are in Congress, that are staffers, that are senators. I mean, what on earth could create the kind of ignorance that would cause you to say such a stupid, inane thing? And how does Caitlin Collins not jump in there? I kind of respect it because she's letting him face plant, but she could have gone back to it, and she doesn't. Oh, well, let's go back to Tommy Stupidville.
Coach for 40 years, and I dealt and had opportunity to be around more minorities than anybody up here on this hill. When our military has been attacked, was being attacked, after dealt and had opportunity to be around more minorities than anybody up here on this hill. But when our military has been attacked, was being attacked after 9/11, after January the 6th, and that was my first day on the Senate floor, I thought it was outrageous of what senators from the Democratic side, Chuck Schumer said on the floor that night, calling out people, calling people racist, calling people nationalists, white nationalists. White nationalists is just another word that they want to use other than racism. I'm totally against anything to do with racism. But the thing about being a white nationalist is just a cover word for the Democrats now, where they can use it to try to make people mad across the country, identity politics. I'm totally against that. But I'm for the American people. I'm for military. I'm for Christian conservatives, Democrats, whoever wants to be in the military to fight for this country, to protect this country. That's what it's all about.
Okay, he's not for identity politics, but he says, I'm for Christian conservatives. Of course, he says that calling the insurrectionists white nationalists was somehow inappropriate. Tell that to my friend Harry Dunn, who got called the N-word all day long while they were beating the hell out of him and his friends in the Capitol Police and D.C. Police. But tell us more, Tommy Tuberville.
But just to be clear, you agree that white nationalists should not be serving in the U.S. military. Is that what you're saying?
If people think that a white nationalist is a racist, I agree with that. I agree they should.
A white nationalist is someone who believes that the white race is superior to other races.
Well, that's some people's opinion. And I don't think,
That's
I mean,
not an opinion.
Pardon?
What's your opinion?
My opinion of a white nationalist, if somebody wants to call him white nationalist, to me is an American. It's an American. Now, if that white nationalist is a racist, I'm totally against anything that they want to do, because I am 110% against racism. But I want somebody that's in our military, that's strong, that believes in this country, that's an American, that will fight along anybody, whether it's a man or woman, black or white, red, it doesn't make any difference. And so I'm totally against identity politics. I think it's ruining this country, and I think that Democrats ought to be ashamed for how they're doing this, because it's dividing this country and it's making this country weaker every day.
But that's not identity politics. You said a white nationalist is an American.
It is identity politics.
You said a white nationalist is an American, but a white nationalist is someone who believes horrific things. Do you really think that's someone who should be serving in the military?
Well, that's just a name that has been given. I mean,
it's not.
Listen,
It's a real definition. There's real concerns about extremism.
So if you're going to do away with most white people in this country out of the military, we got huge problems.
It's not. Huge problems. It's not people who are white. It's white nationalists
that have a few probably different beliefs.
Right?
That have different beliefs. Now, if racism is one of those beliefs, I'm totally against it. I am totally against racism.
But
there's a lot of people that believe in different things.
Is racist, Senator?
Well, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. But if it's racism, I'm totally against it. I am totally against any type of race or any type of racism. I don't care what it's in.
Okay, Senator Tommy Tuberville.
All right. So, I mean, I just can't. I'm almost more upset with Caitlin Collins' inability to focus on the word white next to the word nationalist. So even if you didn't believe nationalists brought to mind some concerning things, white nationalist, there's a huge problem, of course, we've talked about it over and over, with white nationalists, extremism, racism in the military. If they didn't start that way, they often become that way in the military. It is a huge problem, not unlike sexual assault in the military, epidemic. And if you didn't realize that, if you don't know that, you're clearly not paying attention. And if you're a U.S. senator or a journalist, quote, on a major media outlet, and you don't know how to talk about that, you're not paying attention, which is why the criticism of Caitlin Collins and where she kind of comes from and her background has always been disconcerting. I thought that was a piss poor conversation. Something to remember, by the way, that Alabama voters replaced Senator Doug Jones, who actually prosecuted the Klan for the Birmingham church bombing, with this guy, Tommy Tuberville, a man who thinks white nationalists aren't necessarily racists. White nationalist is a racist. That's your opinion. I mean, I just can't get that out of my brain. Here's some more reaction. Former commanding general of the United States Army in Europe. You've probably seen him on TV as a commentator now. His name is Mark Hertling, and he says, this despicable man, Senator Tuberville, is knowingly contributing to further misplaced distrust of our institutions, and he is significantly damaging the national security of our nation. Republican senators, you need to stop this. He's an embarrassment to all of you, as he continues. I don't think they're going to stop it, Mark. And Joy Reid writes on Instagram, please take the time to watch this clip more than once to get a full understanding of the deflection and gaslighting that is going on in the GOP. Opinion and fact are two completely different things, but this is exactly how these false narratives get created. Racism is an undeniable core value of white nationalism. It does not exist without it. It's the exact reason why anyone that identifies as such has no place in the military or any other state, federal funded organization. Listen to his words. If that's his definition of a, quote, American, what does that make the rest of us? Perfectly put by Joy Reid. I wish Caitlin Collins would have just laid a hand on him. You might argue she did just by letting him talk, but anybody can kind of do that. All right, another big story, if I could possibly move past that one, is almost as crazy. It's almost as crazy. You know, the missing Hunter Biden witness that Republicans like James Comer and Jim Jordan have been promising for a while? They couldn't find him anywhere. Well, he was just been charged by the Department of Justice with being a Chinese spy. That's right. The U.S. attorney announced charges against a co-director of a think tank for acting as an unregistered foreign agent, trafficking in arms, violating U.S. sanctions against Iran, and making false statements to federal agents. Here's another way of putting it. The Republicans' key whistleblower has been indicted for working to advance the interests of China. Gal Luft is his name, G-A-L-L-U-F-T. He's the co-director of the Institute for the Analysis of Global Security think tank in Washington, D.C., and he was indicted by the U.S. Southern District of New York. The indictment was unsealed on Monday. He subverted foreign agent registration laws in the United States to seek to promote Chinese policies by acting through a former high-ranking U.S. government official. He acted as a broker in deals for dangerous weapons in Iranian oil, and he told multiple lies about his crimes to law enforcement. As the charges unsealed today reflect, our office will continue to work vigorously with our law enforcement partners to detect and hold accountable those who surreptitiously attempt to perpetrate malign foreign influence campaigns here in the United States. That is part of the statement from U.S. Attorney Damian Williams. He was originally arrested in February in Cyprus before skipping bail and going on the lam. He remains a fugitive. Congressional Republicans, who said they spoke with him about the business dealings of the Biden family, told members of the press that he had gone missing. Well, there you go. This is going to be a huge story, and Democrats on the Oversight Committee are going to pound Republicans, and so will everybody else everywhere. And, of course, they will find ways to defend themselves. But this is a huge story, so follow that one closely. All right, well, that's all I've got for you in the news segment. It's probably too long already, especially because I have an hour-long conversation with Virginia Heffernan. Whoever has the time and interest to listen to all this, I certainly do appreciate it because I put a tremendous amount of work into it. So thank you very much for those of you who do. I could not be more grateful. And please consider a paid subscription if you haven't already. You can always pay a couple bucks more if you're getting a lot out of the work and the show that we do each and every day here. And by we, I mean I. And by we, I mean I can't do it without your support, but it's just me really here, sitting here and in my shed, booking guests, preparing to interview them, doing the interviews, editing the interviews, posting it all online so you can download it, and then obviously promoting it all. I'm 9 people's jobs here, and I cannot do it without your support. So thank you for that. All right, let's get to my conversation with Virginia Heffernan, who is simply, I know I say this about a lot of people, generally speaking, the people that come on this program are the smartest people I can find. It's pretty much always true, but Virginia Heffernan is got to be one of the top. She's a speaker, she's an author, she's a futurist, she advises people in both industry and the arts, a journalist, a critic. Her book, Magic and Lost, The Internet as Art from 2016, is so original, so amazing. She has got a great Substack, which I love reading as well. VirginiaHeffernan.substack.com. I highly recommend you get yourself a subscription. Of course, she has a PhD. She went to Harvard. She went to the University of Virginia, and she is the least elitist type of person. I just want to mention that. She rolls in some really influential circles. She knows everybody in all kinds of places, but she never comes off to me as better than, holier than anyone else. And she's a genuine, honest, vulnerable, brilliant, hilarious person who I absolutely love talking to. Today, no exception, probably one of my favorite conversations ever with her. Follow her on social media, learn more about her in the show notes. Let's do it right now with the great Virginia Heffernan. She really is one of my favorite people to talk to. I love to read her and listen to her, and like somebody else on Twitter, sometimes I'll just use Twitter just to go check and see what Virginia Heffernan is up to. Welcome back. Great to see you. You were just with your giant family in Ireland, which is not something you've been doing your whole life, but something you're doing now, and you've been tweeting about it, and it's so interesting.
Pete, you are my chosen podcast family, so we're family too, right?
Okay, love it.
I'm so happy to see you. I have gotten back into my extended family, which used to embarrass me. There's a certain number of Irish Americans that have their names, but pretend during St. Patrick's Day parade and Kiss Me, I'm Irish and stuff, that they're above it. Like they sort of pretend that they're wasps, right? Like all of us want to just like blot out our freckles and like tamp down our drinking habits and our like melodramatic moods and just pretend we're like stoic wasps who have 2 kids, like a respectable American person. None of these 8s and 5s and 12s. That's just, there's something, you know what, overly ethnic about it. And also like, who identifies with white ethnic identities? You know, they're just sort of grim. And
Italian
I mean,
and Irish.
It doesn't have a good history. Yeah. It doesn't have a good history.
Right. Well, your dad was one of 9?
My dad was one of 9. One of them died in childhood. The remaining 8, except for one who became a nun, all had a bunch of children. So there were 30. I had 30 cousins, 32 grandchildren, including my brother and me. And then they all had a ton of children. And then some of them have had children. So some of my cousins are grandparents. A lot of my cousins are grandparents. And most of them have dropped the Catholicism, but we have not dropped the family self-congratulation that only a giant family can have, where you really think that people want to hear you sing the family song and everyone's happy to see you. And all of this is compounded by the fact that while 2 of my cousins are homeless, many of them have died early. Some of them are disabled with injuries. We tend to be thrill seekers. So there's some frisbee while you're skiing that sometimes can end in serious injuries. While not all of us have thrived, 2 of us did really well and started this company called Life is Good, those T-shirts that are, if you can picture them and their cornballness.
Your family, someone in your family started that company?
My cousins, Bert and John Jacobs. And that Life is Good slogan, and also the custom T-shirts that say things like Tipperary Insanity, which is the one we just had at this family reunion in County Tipperary, Ireland. Those things characterize our family reunions. And as I said to you earlier, I've tried to learn to stop worrying and love the bomb. And now I'm just all with the Kiss Me, I'm Irish. I'm not going to try to pretend to anyone that I'm an aloof wasp. I'm just like a big, boisterous Irish freak.
How long and why were you suppressing that?
Well, some of it, Ireland was immersed in the Troubles when we were growing up, and it was so conservative because of its Catholic theocracy that I sort of stood with like Sinead O'Connor when she ripped up the picture of the Pope and said, "Fight the real power." And the Catholicism was kind of ominous when I was there. My grandfather was an obstetrician, radically anti-abortion, and we had to have communion when we went to our family reunions when they were still alive. And I wasn't allowed to take it because actually my mother did raise us as Protestants. And we also had to hide the fact that we were Protestants, had to hide the fact if we lived with someone, 1 or 2 of my cousins got pregnant as teenagers, and just forced pregnancies, shotgun weddings. Oh. So some of that was really, we had to wait. Well, we probably had to wait till they died, as wonderful as they were. We had to wait till our parents loosened up. And once my cousins, who are like in their 60s, kind of took over, they had all gone different paths. And it was Sunday in County Tipperary when I first arrived. All the cousins are there, 150 of us in one, giant lakeside resort area in a takeover, full January 6th insurrection in a County Tipperary hotel of Heffernan's. On Sunday, nobody went to Mass. And I just turned to my brother and I was like, is nobody going today? It really looks like it.
Oh, wow.
There was no Mother Mary, our Lord.
Is there any way to say the percentage that are citizens of Ireland versus U.S. or other countries?
Oh, none of us are citizens of Ireland. And part of the reason that my family also didn't really wear green and do a lot of parades is that Ireland was in the midst of the Troubles and we were all from Boston, right? It's just total, the sad side is it's just the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, very pale, sad, Mystic River people on the one hand, but fake happy. That's our thing.
Fake happy.
Good, right? It's not toxic positivity because it's sort of way beyond that. It's cosmic, intoxicated positivity. So every day is a good day. There's no way to say it isn't. But anyway, none of us had been, or almost none of us had been to Ireland. I've been a few times, but it's weird. We sort of stayed away from the Irish part of things in favor of this very diaspora Irish, associated with the Boston Red Sox and Dunkin' Donuts and all the Boston stuff.
That is, I just can't imagine. At one point, apparently your brother, you only have one. Your parents did not.
Ooh, you're seeing the pill in there, and don't tell my grandparents. We had 2 children in my family, and that was also a source of potential.
Wild. You wrote, last night my brother performed a one-man 75-minute production of Joyce's novella, The Dead. One man. He memorized it, performed every character. It was brilliant. And 150 descendants of John Heffernan who left Tipperary for Boston during the family at 16 alone teared up. And I just describe that evening and that feeling. Why did who is your brother?
My brother's an actor named Andrew Heffernan. He also writes, and he also is a fitness guru in LA, and a really great guy, but just an extraordinary physical performer. I don't know how much you or people know about The Dead, but it's the last story in James Joyce's collection, The Dubliners, and it's just a very typically beautiful Irish story. It's about 100 years old. Joyce was 25 when he wrote it, and it's the story of one night at a party, but it has all the elements of melancholia and sort of drunkenness and joy on top of it, and just a love of language. People, Richard, my husband, and I went walking, who's not Irish, went walking one morning in Tipperary, just to give you an idea of how committed everyone is to language. And the first thing that happened is the guy that picked us up in the shuttle bus said, are you only carrying one bag then between you? And I said, yeah, we just decided to put our stuff in one bag and check that bag. And the guy said, oh, using your head then.
Wow.
Just a comment about everything.
Right.
There's nothing that's just gotta keep busy. In response to everything, there's something that, anyway. So using your head then became one thing we said. And Richard started to say, they need a response to everything. Anyway, we're walking along early in the morning, jet lagged, to get some breakfast, and we're not talking, just for a minute. And some other, couple walking along, the guy says, "Check out your tongue, you're awfully silent this morning."
Wow. That's...
that if you're not constantly telling a story with all kinds of details, something is wrong with you. And that is sort of what that's thematized in The Dead. You're just always freaking talking, and you're always telling stories and making commentary and observations. And that's what the story of the dead is about. And somehow my brother managed to perform male characters, female characters, drunk characters, young, old characters, all at this party, also doing the narration. It ends with one of the most beautiful speeches in English literature, or sort of passages in English literature. And when he rendered that, by the time he rendered that, his character Greta has remembered that the love of her life died early, and she's telling her husband, basically that this was the man she had really loved, and they're in middle age. And at first he starts out jealous, and then in this extraordinary move, he recognizes that Michael Fury, the love of her life, was this special character, and that he can love Michael Fury for her and with her, which is just amazing. And at the end, I made some kind of yelp of tears. My father was sobbing. Probably my dad's last trip to Ireland. He's not well. My cousins, I looked over, Mikey Heffernan, just going, wow. It was just so nice to be united in this experience, because it's an experience of revelry and an experience of profound grief, this play. And that's sort of what an Irish reunion is about. We've lost a lot of relatives. We lost someone to COVID. We have a cousin, one little cousin of mine, an infant, drowned in a pool when he was born. My first cousin, Steve.
Oh, dear.
And two of my beloved, my generation cousins died of cancer not long ago. And, there's been plenty of tragedy. But by the time he got to the end of it, something like the snow, I'm going to forget it, but it's like the snow was falling over all the living and the dead. And it's just such a beautiful ending. It was like for absent friends.
Yeah, I just, what a profoundly thoughtful thing to do. Well, the whole event, the reunion, most people probably don't do that. For those who do, the idea that someone from the family would give any type of performance, much less this one, which is so weighted with symbolism of your family and your culture, is just like you just describing it. And I saw that tweet and I was like, wait, what? Her brother did what? You also wrote, you mentioned, some of the losses there, and there's this wonderful quote of your grandfather, the anti-abortion obstetrician.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm still thinking about that. When he said, when my grandfather's oldest son, my Uncle Roy, died at 13, Grandpa said, quote, "Into every life a little rain must fall," which I thought was poignant. But how does anybody know that he said that?
He wrote a little memoir, just self-published for all of us when he was older, for the cousins, for his grandchildren. And in that, I think he recounts thinking that. And the book is called More Sunshine Than Shadow. There are two things to think about. Into every life a little rain must fall is on the one hand, yes, right? The sunshine and shadow of existence. On the other, maybe take a few more moments to grieve, right? Give yourself a breath before you go to, the family slogan, which is life is good. I do think that most of us, including me, are virtually incapable of not believing that life is good. How some people just can't.
Yeah. It's all suffering.
Believe. Yeah. But there's this just sort of move to optimism that's in my neurons. So things can look really kind of bleak around me. And somehow I think well, we needed the rain, I think it can be a little maddening because I have a hard time calling it a defeat. I think with every fiber of my being, Biden will win, right? Biden will win again. If he loses, I promise you, I'll come on the show and say, well, he fought a good fight, and also his ideas are ascendant, and also Trump only has one more term.
The way you're describing yourself is I identify with entirely. All the rest of the stuff that you've talked about with your family has been completely foreign to me. So we arrive there in certainly different ways. Absolutely. And many people in my life do not share that point of view, and that's obviously challenging. But you tweeted about this on this idea. You wrote, "Life objectively by the science sucks. No one can pray away cancer, and none of the dead kids are in heaven." Why are we wearing cornball Tipperary insanity hoodies that also say life is good? Because we literally can't believe otherwise. I can't. I've tried and I can't. And you've just really described that. But I completely identify with it. Yeah.
Wait, so do you feel as though, like, when people disagree with you on that, or are kind of like, the climate apocalypse is upon us and fascism holds sway all over the land, do you think that you see the facts otherwise?
No.
Or do you,
some of them.
Yeah,
some of them.
Life is good.
The best example is my brother, who is my polar opposite.
Okay.
And so the question is, go ahead with what your point is, though, about the fact. If you see the facts,
you just tell me about you and your brother, actually.
Well, he saw the rise of fascism forever. He would point out all kinds of trends with racism and sexism when we were young, when I didn't even know the concepts very well. He always seems to see bad things coming. He said Trump would definitely win. Often he's right about things that happen, and yet his entire life and his work and his career, it's so much different than mine. However, I think it's fair to say that my life is because of his. So I watched him and the way he saw things and looked at things, and I think I did the opposite of it most of the time. For example, finally, he started drinking at 14 or 15, got in trouble. I saw that. He went to rehab. We did an intervention. I was like, I'm good. I didn't have a drink till I was 21. It was not of my, which is a weird thing to do as a young man who's popular and confident and an athlete and all the things, because drinking's everywhere. It was hard, but I never did that until I got older.
Interesting. Right. And I think that a certain amount of pessimism, syncs with reality, right?
Yes.
And just bearishness in general on like what the future's going to be probably doesn't hurt. But as I say, I never get there. Like all those people who said, I saw Trump coming.
Yeah. I
was absolutely shocked and floored. I mean, I still don't quite understand how people can say, I knew he was going to win when he won by the skin of his teeth.
Agreed.
But good for you that you called that those counties would go to him if
Agreed.
you did. But
and you run that election 10,000 more times and it doesn't come out that way, probably.
Right, exactly. But yeah, for people who saw that happening, but one thing I'm glad I don't have to contend with is that, I think I've said to you before, when in 2020, when Trump was still the president, and seemed like he'd have a good chance of getting reelected, and there was a pandemic going on, all the way up to his losing in 2021, and then January 6th. I thought, if we ever have a new president, and if we ever have a vaccine, I will remember, I promise you, universe, I will remember how horrible it was to have, a million Americans die, a million Americans and tens of millions of people around the world dying of this virus that we don't have a vaccine against, and having a president command the armed forces and the nuclear arsenal who is so ill-intentioned and racist and grabs women and is sort of, we couldn't have designed a worse person to sit in the Oval Office and be our commander in chief. And I don't think, and I pretty much have lived by that since Biden was inaugurated. I'm just like I'm like somewhat happy every day because it's not.
I am too, but I like the way that you described all that. But getting back to, I want to hear your thoughts. I picked politics. I should have picked the weather. My Val and I are completely opposite on that. She'll look at the little app and she sees a cloud and a sun, and she's like, "Oh, it's gonna be cloudy." I'm like, "There's a sun."
Right.
And then even if it's all cloudy all week, I'm like, it's never right. And that cloud is just representative of like the majority of the day. There still will be sun. And by the way, even if it rains all day, which it did yesterday, it was like 10 inches in a day, I will still find joy. I will find it. I will do something. I will find. I have to. That's the way my mind thinks. I've been dealing with a lot over the past few years, more than I ever have. But I've lost that optimism at times. But now I'm doing really well in the face of adversity.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think it's a cast of mind. You know, I'm not sure that someone can kind of change and see, you know, and look at that same mixed weather report and see the sunshine. I mean, it is interesting just that not even metaphorically, Ireland is, have you ever visited?
No.
I mean, it's such a lovely, you know, quick flight from the East Coast. And it is...
how long is it from New York?
It rains, it's a little over 5 hours, okay. You know, so it's like not too bad. It rains every day and a lot. But the sun comes out also, and there's a reason that there's leprechauns and pots of gold in the lore, because there are rainbows just all the time. I mean, the reason that it's not paradise on earth, given how green it is and, you know, how lovely it is and that it's an island, is because it rains all the time. So it's probably the perfect place to find mental workarounds to say, you know, to say like, oh, we needed the rain, or a nice soaking rain. You know, we went jumped off this old bridge in County Tipperary. It was like, you know, 30 meters up into the water.
You jumped off a bridge 30 meters. That's very high.
When you're around these cousins, and I'm telling you, they are wild. Like, they're definitely like, oh, I'm 60 and I'm going to run the, you know, Boston Marathon in Timberlands because that's what I happen to be wearing.
What?
Someone did that? This thing and it starts raining, and everyone is like fair-skinned, barely dressed, you know, old, and they're just like, oh, why would we go in when it's raining? You know, like, of course we're jumping into an old lake when it's raining in Ireland. Like, it's not like, you know, some Costa Rica organized, planned thing. And there was like eels in the river. In the river. It was the River Shannon. Anyway, I don't act like that way when I'm not with my cousins, but when I am, there's this like weird, buoyant, life is good spirit that my two cousins, the Jacobs brothers, have built, and we all wear the t-shirts. And there's no confining New York cool or like stylishness to adhere to. You would love it, honestly.
Yeah,
Pete,
literally right when you said that, I was like, I want to go. Do you have tickets? Do you have to marry in? How does one get invited? I could do a one-man show for like not an hour though. I can't.
My God, they would love that. I mean, there was also a 4-hour talent show.
Who books it?
Well, this one was like more extravagant than any. Usually they're just like barbecues and people camp, but this one, because Bert and John decided to do it, they even flew in like there's this annual Frisbee game that the Heffernans and the Jacobs and the Laughlins, so the whole family, play in outside Boston, and called the Marie's Cup. And they've been playing it for 25 years. And the team they play against, it's complicated. You have to marry in to be on our team or be born it. It's just a total Windsor dynasty.
Man.
But so they play against another team, and that team can recruit. So that team is always better and they always win. And they're called the Outsiders, and they wear different t-shirts. Anyway, Bert and John flew those guys in, so we didn't have to play each other. So they were there, and a couple of them were stand-up comics. And in the talent show, they got to play. So if you're athletic, he also had like a professional musician whose work I didn't know come in for it. But if you have talents that you can offer the family, especially sports and music and poetry.
Are there any single in their 40s women, early 50s, late 30s?
Yes, there are. But I bet he brought the Outsiders and their family. Do you play Frisbee? That's the main question.
Not well. I mean, I can do most sports pretty decently, but I would train if I was invited. I would be training regularly, so as to be able to compete at a level.
That's what Richard's doing right now. Because Bert didn't put him in, because Bert doesn't play anymore, and he'll look over my like young cousins who are eager to play and just say like, nope. Like, you're not good enough. He's so.
Was Richard upset that he didn't get put in?
Richard was kind of upset.
I would be so disappointed, but like you sat the bench at the family reunion Frisbee thing because you weren't the right whatever.
He had to like give his track times afterward, and some of the outsiders, so the other team, told Bert like that he'd really missed a chance by not putting Richard in. But Richard tried to like do a showdown with him, and he just was like, "Oh, if I'd wanted to play, I would have played." When Bert came to apologize, I was like, I don't know the sports alpha male thing.
Richard did that. That is hilarious.
Yeah,
a showdown. He confronted him over it. Well, I mean, I can. That's a whole nother conversation. Sports and men. I mean,
yeah.
I may have a pretty good insight on that. I want to ask you about some of the other things that you've been writing about. I can always talk about anything with you, and you write about so many different things. You write a lot about social media, and you have for a long time, obviously. You are a tech journalist. You cover all of this stuff, but I don't think you've written yet, much less tweeted too much about Threads, and I'm sure that you will, and it's brand new. But I wonder, you wrote about Twitter being basically dead not too long ago. What's the landscape looking like? Everybody's making jokes about how many things we've all signed up for, and I think probably the saddest thing is that we're signing up for all these other things to try to recreate what we had at Twitter, and you can't recreate the community that you built in one town in another town. It's always going to be different, I guess.
That's right. I mean, I'm not sure that piece, and maybe the piece in the Atlantic, said exactly that Twitter was dead, but I think I thought that the kind of Twitter that I think you and I got a lot out of, which was like, as just ridiculously corny as it is, was about sort of learning and teaching and making each other laugh. The number of people I followed with hugely different areas of expertise and experience that blew my mind open, and in some cases my heart open, over in sort of the last phase of my time there, starting in 2016. I mean, I joined in 2008, so there were a lot of different cycles, but the one that's so dominant is actually the one that Elon Musk was eager to stamp out, which was, a lot of formerly verified accounts, journalists who were like, and entertainers and former federal prosecutors sort of standing up to like explain things to us and wanting not the verified check to be like having a Gucci bag, but more like, because Asha Rangappa, you don't want someone simulating her. You want to be able to look her up on LinkedIn and know that she was a former FBI person. She teaches at the Yale Law School. She is who she says she is. So that there was less masquerade and less of that silliness, and more people coming in and saying, I'm Pete Dominick, I'm Asha Rangappa, I'm Gary Kasparov, I'm, George Conway, and I have a set of things I know and have experienced and seen, and here's how I can illuminate this thing. And then there was the possibility of like chipping off all these jokes which were wonderful or funny threads in the context of this like incredibly tragic, difficult event. And so providing some clarity and humor was a public service.
You mean specifically because you said 16, the election?
Yeah, 26. Through from, Trump's presidency and the pandemic.
Oh, all the way through. Right. Yeah.
Some of the hardest things we've, endured as a nation, and to just have a group of like-minded people, but people who also challenged each other, you know?
Yep.
I mean, I was a different person as a thinker after those years on Twitter. And all of this is like, Twitter's too ironic and salty to get too misty-eyed about it. Like, who wants to be like, I love you guys? Although there has been a little bit of that.
Don't tell me I can't get misty. I've been misty-eyed about it. I haven't outright cried, but I have spent some time. It really, because I think it's been a beautiful thing. The only thing you didn't mention is just the connections, which you did mention, but like the connections that it creates are what open your mind and your heart in a sustained way, not just maybe that day, but you keep coming back to those people, those feeds, those moments, and those connections, and it really does feel warm. and happy and secure there.
Yeah. And yes, exactly. And, in the spirit of like, what is, quote, good for us or not good for us, it's really hard for me to think that, you and I have been raising kids, since 2016. I mean, before 2016, but we, kid troubles, romantic troubles, fired, not fired, new jobs, whatever. And had we not had Twitter, we would have, who are you? The atomization of our society meant that, like, I'm not going to talk to Elie Mystal. He doesn't live near me. We don't run in the same circles. And I met him there, right? That is a good thing. It's good that I met you through there. It's good that I meet people that I just wasn't trapped in my life in a way that I might have been otherwise. I would go back and give Twitter to, especially, all these women kind of stuck at home and in their heads, or stuck in their family unit and in their heads, just doing nonstop mothering, and just thinking of some of those people coming and tweeting with their legal expertise or their whatever, just getting back in this like important conversation and often giving like action items. I didn't know Shannon Watts before this of Mom's Demand. And, I don't know if I'm putting it right, but it's hard to even remember or imagine what the pandemic would have been like without social media and without Twitter in particular.
Well, where are we now with the fragmented social media landscape? And
I don't know. I'm not, I don't even, okay. So Instagram, we follow each other, I guess, on Instagram. Instagram has never really worked. I'm just like not that good at it. I think
Me neither.
Yeah. I don't really know what you're supposed to do with it. I don't understand that you can't link.
There's many functionalities and there's many non-functionalities, and much of it is based on imagery and photos and then reels and stories. And so for someone like yourself, and I'll throw myself in that category, who is more about like the spoken word and thoughts, and that's just it's not the same. A lot of people, Soledad O'Brien forever just took pictures of her tweets and posted them on Instagram.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's fascinating. I don't think I follow her on Instagram. Yeah, I think I took a couple of years off from Instagram. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know how long the captions are. I don't understand the linking. Like you can't, like you have to be like link in bio. You can't put a link in the caption. I don't understand it. Anyway, but I have to say, I did sort of predict one thing, which is like when I was going to say Trump, but when Elon Musk announced he was buying Twitter, I sort of thought the only monster Thanos style, Avengers style, like company that could rival a Musk Twitter is Facebook, Meta. And because they have all the people already, right? Now they have all the people already, but that didn't work for me for getting followers. When I got on Mastodon, posts like just dutifully went wherever people said the next thing was. My followers racked up quickly because people told people to follow me, and it was the same Twitter crowd. But this one is like all your Instagram followers know you're there, but it doesn't connect to your same set. So like there are all these like other mothers and like local whatever people that I followed on Instagram because Instagram was so homey.
Yeah. It's a different network for sure.
It's a different network. And it was one that I was like, damn it, I didn't cultivate it. It's like one of those countries like the Austro-Hungarian Empire where like they're different leaders. And like, depending on if you like suck up to the communists, you're like wrecked in the next economy or with the next leadership.
The worst thing for me, the most embarrassing thing is I've tried to resist the temptations to follow women that I find attractive. But like, and I have a weird kink for athletic women. And so like, I've always been attracted to like soccer players. So like I follow like the women's soccer team and then like a couple like fitness models, which I didn't think anybody would know that I even followed. And I don't feel good about it, but now like they're in my Twitter, they're my threat.
And you're like, oh, they're not the master tweeters you'd expect them to be on threads. Like maybe they're not really.
I'm just there for their thoughts, obviously, but
yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different network is the point I'm making. Like I'm not following those people, those women on Twitter.
And
I wouldn't even know. Yeah.
You know, with all the clones, it's almost like the Mastodon, Blue Sky, and now Threads and Post have all kind of had a different take on the familiar user interface. And it's like almost like the platform or the style itself seems to be kind of coming apart in certain ways. Like you're just like, oh, they're moving the retweet and the thing around, but all of these seem like carbon copies that are getting like fainter and fainter, and it's like getting harder and harder to remember what that a special, like remember every time one of the Mueller indictments came down and on Fridays, and there would just be this like really interesting processing, or someone like, you know, live tweeting one of the Trump rallies.
Sure. Any live tweeting thing. Yeah.
Any live tweeting. So
it.
much. And it was just like, it felt like a public service.
Yep.
And it was just really fun. That just doesn't feel like it's going to coalesce on any of the platforms I've looked at so far. But I will say, I think my favorite's Mastodon, just for its
really?
chill.
Mm.
I like its chill. I don't think it's so complex. I mean, it certainly doesn't have the Twitter intensity, but maybe that's not a bad thing, because maybe we're not going to get it back, Pete. Maybe it's gone.
I keep hearing all the people I like and respect saying that, but the earlier part of our conversation around my optimism is like, no, they'll just reinstate. Twitter will just go back to its default settings. You can just flip a switch. And then I read some thread from some reporter, dug deep into it all, and it's like, yeah, it can't be done. Elon Musk ruined it when he fired all these people. He got rid of, you know, whatever the codes are. I can't explain it, but like you can't do that technically. It's gone. He threw it away, and I don't know if that's right, but it was pretty disappointing to hear that kind of a thing. But
I mean, has it opened up some space in your life to that it's less compelling, that and not all of these are
not really. I mean, the other point about it that I think is really important, I've seen a couple people make this, and I'm sure you know several of them. I'm sure to some extent this has impacted you as well. Like, Twitter's being gone is not going to destroy any economy, not including the media. But those of us who are independent creators, have our own thing, a Substack or a Patreon, a podcast or whatever, and especially in the political space, we're losing big. Like it was such a huge source for me. More than anything else, I've always felt really proud of my work, my independent work, because it's very grassroots, meaning the way I promote it, meaning when I'm able to get great guests like you on, and then people find out that they were on, and then more beautiful, amazing, brilliant people come on. And it's been a great way to create credibility for anybody, with their Substack, their podcast, whatever. And I do see a lot of people who are almost exclusively on Twitter making their living, who had huge followings, hard earned. They are, terrified. And so it's scary from the standpoint of your work not it being your main free advertising tool, promotional tool.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I don't know if you found this, but it's hard to get like major traction for anything you're linking to on Twitter. So like, I mean, a book came out before the election of mine in 2016. And, because I used Twitter and had like had a decent following, people would say, well, how do you promote a book on Twitter? You must know how to do it. I don't think I sold a single copy off Twitter. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes, you'll put up like a podcast you do and there's like, 10, but they don't respond to the content of the podcast in like, they're not reply guys that weigh in and say, at minute 10, 12, you talked about blah, I liked this joke. Like, because they switch into audio mode, they get off Twitter and whatever. So like the Twitter ecosystem, I'm not sure was that great for our other
It wasn't,
work.
and I think you're right that it wasn't moving books and careers dramatically. But it was
making these introductions and very fertile for promoting conversations. I mean, I think you and I met on David Guerra's show.
Yeah, I think we met at MSNBC too. But I certainly knew of you. I think probably because of Twitter, maybe your podcast though.
Yeah, same, something like that. So then David's show, Rest in Power. That was such a good show. What was it called? Up with David Guerra.
Up, yeah, he's such a good guy too. Yeah.
God, he's such a good guy.
Yeah.
And he's so good at his work, too.
Real smart dude. Yeah.
I don't know what happened. He probably had you and me on one too many times.
No, I know what happened. Pretty sure they told me like the ratings were just piss poor because it was, I think, a thoughtful conversation that doesn't necessarily doesn't get great ratings. The people who love it are like hardcore, as you know, being on that show, it hit a really hardcore audience, but it was too smart. It was too smart of a panel. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what they could do differently.
I got to follow him over to NPR because he's such a smart guy.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
In any case, like then that show, and then, there were people that liked that show on Twitter and then, Liz Winstead, a lot of people that are on your show now, Ellie Mistal, Christina Greer, like people that, whose work I started to know.
Yep.
Paul Butler, I remember reading Chokehold right after I met him on that show. And, just this nice morning thing of going in there and seeing people and then reconnecting with them on Twitter. And it was just these networks. And by the way, if listeners are rolling their eyes thinking like, oh, this little fancy group of people that got together on MSNBC, it was silly. It's silly in its own way. But, but it was super fun. And it managed to connect people who I really think wouldn't have connected otherwise.
Oh, yeah, it really was. I think about that show often and that green room often. And you mentioned Paul Butler, who was like so intimidating when I met him. And he was not like he's not an overly friendly guy. I mean, you can get him going, but he's like quiet. And, he's this academic. He's this big black guy who really, and I bring up his size and race because I kind of feel like what he had accomplished in his career, and I felt this way about a lot of people in that green room, he had every right to not be so friendly to me. Like, why are you here? Kind of thing.
Right.
Like, do you know I'm a Georgetown? Like, I've done actually and seen actually and written about the most, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I really need to be in conversation with you. Probably. I'm not sure what I bring to the table, but I'm a good setup. I'm a good setup man.
I remember being like, just finding him so formidable. And then finally, after being on with him a couple times and connecting on air even, afterward, I asked him some questions and then he brought me a copy of Chokehold, which by the way, sidebar, I recommend to everyone, about police violence. Such a good book, Paul Butler. And then I had him on Trumpcast a few times. It was just an ecosystem.
It was.
But I'm not losing my optimism when I say that new things coalesce all the time and find each other all the time. And you and I hung out in person at a party. So like maybe we'll go, maybe we'll hang out in person. And besides, our kids are older, so we're freer anyway. And we can walk around the city together.
Yeah, there's no doubt that people, the connections at times do become, what do we call it? Traditional or real face-to-face?
Yes. Right. They like become manifest or whatever. They go kinetic. Have you ever heard that phrase?
No, but I like it.
It's when you have, but it's usually used in a bad way, but we can optimistically use it in a new way. The bad way is when you're getting threats online and they go kinetic, is when they show up in face and start hurting you. But I think we should make good relationships go kinetic too. Like once you get, in fact, Amanda Ginsburg at Gins, she was that on Twitter, and she's I think that at GUINZ, great, brilliant, witty writer. She and I met in person as Twitter was fading, just to walk around and say, like, what was that?
By the way, that's a wonderful story. I love that. Happened a lot of times to me. And I can't stop thinking about that show and how many people met and how I desperately have wanted to recreate it. I thought during the pandemic, because it was such a blow to David Gura himself, I was like, we should surprise him with a Zoom and all of his favorite guests and just like pop up and have him come in. But then I'm like, now we should do it for real. Like we should do a live thing and just bring all those great people together for one day or a few hours. As many people want to come and weigh in and have him be there. It would be really wonderful. I think about that a lot.
I absolutely love that idea.
Just invite everybody to a bar and throw out a couple microphones. I mean, it wouldn't be hard. But I got to ask you about another thing you wrote about, which really resonated with me, I think probably with everybody. It's about dieting and this, I'm not going to say weird, but pretty original ideology and podcast, food psych. Everybody needs to read this. Subscribe, of course, to Virginia's Substack, but this one in particular, if anybody has any kind of food issues, dieting issues, body issues, you talk about your own in this, you touch on your own and what you've tried. But what's the gist of it? Because I think it's pretty counterintuitive.
Yeah. So like a lot of people, Americans, people in the Western world, I never wasn't on a diet. Sometimes that diet was my patented and very filling pita bread filled with shredded lettuce with mustard as the extra treat. That was my one meal in the middle of the day. And then just, going to bed hungry and trying to keep my weight, for my life, basically what it had been, when I was 14. Right. Mm-hmm. And that, kind of worked and worked and worked until it didn't, until it became way more challenging to eat that way without, passing out or without cigarettes to keep it going through the 90s. And I never once considered that I wouldn't go to bed normal, like on top of whatever else is going on in my life, and calculate exactly what I'd eaten that day and, exactly how wicked or, good and moral that made me. And also what its consequences were for my body, like what I was fitting into and what I looked like. And it just was like, I was like one of those, I just read something about Mother Teresa's nuns, like doing these penances and like praying for basically it had become a religion. And I knew that it was sort of a religion like that for everyone. And I just sort of thought that was the religion we were growing up in. Right. Yeah. And then I think
for women, especially, I mean, I'm not going to say men don't struggle with it. I'm not going to say that at all. But,
Yeah. I mean, my brother's, a personal trainer, fitness guru. So like there was a lot of talk about, body size and in my house growing up, but it didn't even feel like we were just in an anorexic world. It didn't feel like we were especially diety, right. But like the big compliment is like, oh, you look so slim, right? Like just every time. So right. I've never hospitalized for an eating disorder, just never not dieting, never not giving up some new food group or whatever, or fasting or doing whatever. So then a really, really close friend of mine, Brianna Snyder, someone I met online, and when I met her in person, I realized like I finally had like a truly fat friend, and she was into it. And I remember being surprised when she first showed up. And then I just thought, oh, that's what's been so great about her online is like, she's missing. It really was like a nun meeting someone for the first time who was just like a happy, free woman. Like she's not inhibiting what she eats. She's just eating like a normal, like a natural way of eating that I've never seen. And she likes how she looks and she's awesome. And I was just like, I'll have what she's having. Like, right. I want to like just one night go to bed, not doing an inventory of what I've consumed. And, the other thing is like my kids, had a period where they were a little stouter, and I was really determined that I was not going to say, whatever, say anything about it. Right. And I started to think, the first few times the pediatrician was like, oh, you need more vegetables and you need to avoid whatever to them. It was like, they don't need to be told that. They don't need to have someone look at their weight and tell them that. Let's just not put that in their heads. And so as I got to know Brianna and I got to know Health at Every Size and these other things, I sort of thought, well, that's not really for me, but it's interesting that it's there. And then in 2017, I tuned into, someone told me about Christy Harrison's podcast called Food Psych. And she's a nutritionist who also dieted her whole life. And then one day thought, there's got to be a better way to live than just thinking about food and body size, never ending food and body size. And she started to explore some of the racist origins of diet culture, some of the terrible consequences for individual lives, but also for our cultural world of where, the only business bigger than big food is like big diet, basically, and it was like another big tobacco where we're like eating things to keep us from eating things. And anyway, the more I listen to this show where she like sets goals, she sets like, I don't know why I thought this was so funny, but she was like, someday when you're free of diet culture and you've pulled all the wires out of your head, you're going to drive up to McDonald's and say, I'll have a 12 pack of chicken McNuggets. And I don't even know if 12 pack yet, because I'm not that evolved. But, how long, Pete, have you and I thought chicken McNuggets are just not a thing. Like they just must happen somewhere else. But like, I don't know. They're like little donuts. So yeah, so I was like this like interestingly forbidden thing that, you know, I've just taken off the table. Like in a pinch, you know, I'm on the road and there's nothing to eat but chicken McNuggets. I probably navigate through the McDonald's another way, right? So then I was like, I think I want to risk gaining some weight in order to pull these wires out of my head. Like I just was like, could I imagine the like incredible, what's it called? The unbelievable lightness of being, or
Unbearable.
The lightness of being that might come if I didn't have these thoughts. And if it just felt like I was like, wow, a whole new kind of liberation, like a way that like someone else might just be poly or like leave their marriage and get a car. I was like, get a Ferrari or whatever. I was like, this is a form of liberation, and it started to seem exhilarating. Now, I have still never eaten a chicken McNugget, but I can confidently say I have neither restricted nor binged, which is also something that, you know, diet culture, you end up binging. Once you restrict that much, you binge. So I had binging moments, restricting moments, neither one of those things. I dropped any kind of like food purism of like, does this have trans fats, whatever. I started to be able to eat intuitively. And I will say for listeners who think this is like great, I put on weight. That's like the potential downside. Now, if you feel like you've been eating more than is comfortable for you, you will lose weight once you start intuitive eating. If you've been binging more, I was restricting more, but if you've been binging more and you stop binging, you will lose weight. So you don't know exactly because your eating is also disordered. But there was so much that came of it, which is like weight stigma alone, you know, people who can't fit in airplane seats or are otherwise stigmatized for their weight, which is everyone, you know, everyone who identifies as fat or is deemed fat. And that is brutal for your health. One thing Christy Harrison says is we think so much because we put food in our mouths, we think that must be the determinant of our health. When in fact, like, what about your relationships? What about your travel? What are you reading? How close are you to your kids? Like, there are a lot of how much are you, you know, getting outside, getting sunshine, getting time in nature? I mean, the list is enormous. And somehow we just reduce it to food. I will also say that very recently, after eating heartily for all these years and putting on some weight and knowing what it's like to be outside my comfort zone of size, and in a new, I don't know, like it's not easy. It's really interesting to try to embrace life at this size. I did discover I have gluten intolerance. I was just getting sick all the time, and I got a celiac test, and it came back positive for a sensitivity, at least. So I'm trying not to go crazy on worrying about gluten, but for now I have given it up, but it so far hasn't triggered any other weird habits. But the thing I just would want to tell the listeners is like, it is so fun to free yourself from like binding dogma, cultural dogma, right? Just the same way that being exposed to Black Lives Matter, and even some critical race theory or the Me Too movement, like you were just like, holy shit, the world could be so much bigger than I thought it is, you know? Like,
yeah, I like your metaphor of kind of taking the wires out of your brain, unlearning.
Yeah.
I think I've tried to do that in different ways. It's hard.
Yeah. Like, I know we're sort of running out of time, and I'm yammering like an Irish person, but
I got time.
Oh yeah. So there's this show, Single Drunk Female. Unfortunately, it was just not renewed after 3 amazing seasons, but there's a Gen X person on it. It's a very like whatever the next Zoomer or Gen Z show. And the parody of the Gen X person is the funniest, greatest thing. But one thing that he says is he's like, hey, he's trying to like earnestly understand some kinds of like woke life. And he was like, am I not allowed? I guess I'm not allowed to say like your legs look nice or, you're thin or whatever. So what can I say about people's appearance? Like your shirt looks good, or, you forgot to shave. And the Gen Z people say, what if you just didn't comment on people's looks? Like, you don't have to always comment on people's appearances. And I was like, wow, what a concept. Like just that small thing, but you could comment on like other things too. Like, hey, Pete, like, how's your garden going upstate? Right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a really valuable. I mean, I don't know why or when I learned this, but I definitely learned it in a book when I was reading all those books when my first daughter was born. I never, until very recently and very rarely, do I comment on anything about their appearance. Definitely not when they were young. And even now, rarely. And if only to usually just to make fun of them. Like never like a compliment. Like, really? That's
like, nice shirt. Nice
boots.
Yeah,
who are you dressed as?
Right.
Just like, but that's how that's the humor and at least with me and the girls.
Did your family, when you were growing up, like everybody kind of size each other up when you first see each other, or like, whatever, like, did you comment on each other's looks a lot?
Yes. My brother and I constantly destroyed each other. I had acne only on my sideburns.
Oh, yeah.
Area when I was younger, and it wasn't terrible, but it was pretty exclusive to that part of my face. And my brother called me Zit Burns. And then just like he still calls me Burnsy. I'm like, it's not even relevant anymore. But yeah, I mean, like, so no matter, even the most insecure of things, we would, and we learned that was our way as small people. That was our way of self-defense, and we got our asses kicked plenty for it, but that was what we did. Sure.
Yeah.
And you always have to take somebody, you don't punch down because you're not worried about them. But the people who are, above you, I was recently with a whole bunch of my buddies from high school, and many of them were like, you were mean to me. And I was like, yeah, ask the kids who you were mean to. Like if I was mean to them, and I wasn't. Those kids that were isolated and marginalized, that was my brother. As a matter of fact, my older brother. So I always went after you guys because it was my way to protect myself. And then one guy goes, yeah, but you called me disproportionate boy because my arms and legs didn't match my body. I go, that was probably too far, but you're a big man. And I was afraid you would hurt me.
That is a very uncatchy nickname, I got to say.
It wasn't great. Worked. Did what I needed.
When I was trying to defend myself for like saying that Michael Avenatti was good looking, like Jacob Weisberg used to tease me about this on Trumpcast all the time.
Yeah.
I like really tried to be like, I just thought his face was symmetrical. That's it. It was like just an clinical observation.
That's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
But just not commenting on each other's looks. What a big deal. What a big thing. Like then you think of different ways to start a conversation.
Yes. Yes. It forces you to be more original. Try just a little bit harder than the small talky observations and things. And I think that's great. It's a great lesson.
Just to bring it back around, by the way, Twitter, for all it's always, criticized as toxic and a sewer and whatever else. Like it was really interesting to get to know people without their appearances. Like your appearances are not part of the equation. Like you might find out later that someone you're gotten really close to is in a wheelchair or, has been injured or is fat or is very thin or is, is a different race or just looks a different way than you imagined they looked. And it's just so nice to be like years into exchanges with them. Oh, age, like there were just like some elderly people there that I sort of got to understand better. Yeah,
that's why I always hated when people were, were anonymous. Not always hated, but a lot of times.
Yeah.
Was like, why you're not brave when you're mean and you're anonymous. That's not a brave thing to be is all.
Right.
But yeah.
And that Twitter really was, supposed to eliminate some of those things in its heyday.
Yeah. Yeah, it did though. Well,
It did. I'm glad I'm glad you don't have any problems being a little sentimental about it because I don't.
No, I'm very sentimental about it. I think it's been a beautiful thing to connect people. I think that a lot of the work I've done incidentally or accidentally, and now I want to do it more purposely, has connected people through the podcast, the community that we built here, the radio show. But like I think, and now I've learned how important that is for your well-being, your mental health, is to have connections. There's so much obviously research, especially with men, about loneliness and not having community. I mean, this is, even Buddhism, I guess, talks about this. So it's like the idea that it would create a community and everybody needs a community. So I just want to continue to try to do that however possible.
Yeah, I think
Feels
that's
good.
I really, really like that. And I really appreciate you really do stay in touch with people and you have them on your show. And I love this idea of doing the David Guerra thing. I
love people. I love the Heffernans, which is why I've applied during this conversation. I sent in an app.
In the notes, I saw that. You were like, does anyone have someone
Is there a single Heffernans app?
Totally, you're right. Like a Tinder for Heffernans. I really like it.
Training Frisbee.
You'd fit right in. It's just the Frisbee. You got everything else.
Thank you so much for talking to me, as always. Really fun.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Oh, yeah. I kind of feel like, I don't know. If you listen to that whole conversation, I'm super thankful and grateful, obviously, always. But I don't know. That was a real ride. When I got done with that, I felt good. I really enjoyed talking to her. I always do. But I remember just feeling very good when we finished that. So I hope that you appreciated it and enjoyed it as much as I certainly did, as much as it seems like Virginia does. And I look forward to talking to her again. And I look forward to talking to you. Remember, the Hangout is not Thursday this week, but Friday. I hope to see you there. Please sign up for a subscription if you haven't. Tell your friends about it. Write a review of the show. And follow me on all the social medias, the TikToks, the Threads, the Facebooks, the Instagrams. I'm on all of them. Don't love being on all of them. Don't love social media, but it's free advertising and promotion for the show, and obviously a way to connect with people and all the other ways as well, and see what you're all up to and doing and hear from you. Happy birthday to Christine Thomas, as a matter of fact. Wouldn't know that without Facebook. All right, that's it. That's all. I think you're going to love what I've got coming for you tomorrow. Rhymed with Mughal sang. I will talk to you then. And as a result of the horrible comments by Tommy Tuberville in the State of the Nation, our quote of the day comes from civil rights activist Marian Anderson, who once said, "No matter how big a nation is, no stronger than its weakest people. And as long as you keep a person down, some part of you has to be down there to hold him down. So it means you cannot soar as you might otherwise." Whew. Like that one. Thanks, Marian Anderson. Look her up, by the way. An interesting woman who did a lot that I hadn't heard of until I was looking up, trying to find some quotes. So there you go. I'll talk to you tomorrow, folks. Go buy this song. Support John Carroll, who supports us every day with his music. JohnCarroll.org. Take it away, brother.
Stand our ground, and then stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.